Hi, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Night Ranger, also known as Simba, and today I'm going to tell you how to perfect your sleep. I'm not going to talk about any wishy-washy. I'm not going to go beat around the bush. Today is just part facts that I've heard from the Human Man Lab podcast that I would link at the top of the description if you want a full video and how to absolutely make your sleep the alpha, the absolute ultimate version. Go watch that podcast. But today what I wanted to do was to summarize and to synthesize what Andrew Huberman said in this podcast. And I'm going to go through the 5 main variables that really define whether you sleep well or you have a terrible night of sleep. Those being light, those being temperature, those being exercise, those being drugs, and those being naps / NSDR, meaning non-sleep deep rest technique. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, smash that. No, I'm not gonna do any of that. If you like my videos, subscribe, right? It's simple as that. And I'm trying to make my videos as concise, as scientific, and as straightforward as possible for the human understanding. I'm not going to go through any very difficult scientific words. If I do, I'm going to explain them fully and where they came from. And so, let us start. So, first point, light or sunlight. The most important thing in our brain that controls when we sleep and when we wake up is called the circadian clock. Right, scientific term. What does the circadian clock mean? It means a clock that controls your brain and tells it when to sleep and when to wake up. It's not the alarm clock that we have in the morning where we buzz and rings and like you get very pissed off when it rings, right? It's not that. It's the natural waking and sleeping system that generates and degenerates melatonin in your brain. And the idea of the circadian clock is that the reason we have this kind of device is for us as cavemen 100,000 years ago, that's what I mean, that we can actually wake up at the first, at dawn, then we can go to sleep at dusk. And how do we perfect our circadian clock so we don't get nocturnal, so we don't get stressed at night, and how do we go to sleep perfectly? So in the morning, the first thing to do is to look at sunlight in the first 30 minutes to 60 minutes of waking up. This resets your circadian clock and lets your mind know that, okay, this is the time we wake up. So when it gets a certain amount of time, for example, 12 hours, your circadian clock would be like, okay, so we woke up at 8 a.m. in the morning, and then we're going to go to sleep at 8 p.m. in the morning, because that's normally how the natural routine goes. That was just an example. Your circadian clock might not work like that, might be 14 hours, might be 16 hours, but in the end, this principle is the same. We have a designated waking up hour, then we tell ourselves, okay, we woke up then. And then it sets an automatic timer for a designated time. Okay, when do we sleep? You don't have to look directly at the sun, but looking into the sun makes our eyes, right, it goes into our eyes and goes to the retina. And the retina is this part at the end of the eye, right, at the bottom of the eye, that is the light receptor for all natural light that we see, artificial light, natural light, any type of luminescence. We see that in our retina. The retina gives our brain a picture. Okay, we see this light. And why sunlight? Why not just any artificial light to be like, click, our circadian clock starts at the start of the day? Because artificial light, at least most lights, are not strong enough to reset the circadian clock. A statistic we're going to look here is the number of lux, which means lux is the measurement of light. A normal artificial light, for example, one of those overhead lights or a bedside lamp, might just have 500 to 1,000 lux in the beam. The beam power is about 1,000 lux maximum. Whereas sunlight, when you directly look at sunlight, or at least you look at some rays of sunlight, it would give up to 5,000 to 10,000 lux, meaning that artificial light would not start your circadian clock. which basically highlights the importance of looking at sunlight, telling your brain, okay, we're going to start the day right now. And also, point number 2, why is sunlight so important for us? Sunlight basically wakes us up. Looking at sunlight makes us more alert throughout the day. It increases our productivity, and it just tells your brain, okay, now we're going to start work. If you don't look at sunlight in the morning, it basically tells your brain, okay, we're still in sleep mode. And that's bad, because if you're working, for example, at 8 a.m. in the morning, then your brain is still on sleep mode. You can't perform to your optimum peak, right? And that's a problem, because we always want to maintain peak productivity during the day. What if you ask me, okay, you're from the UK, you don't have any light. Bro, I'm from the UK as well. It's fact, we don't have much light, right? In the morning, especially in winter times, you don't get any light. So what could be a replacement, or what could you do to emphasize that sunlight actually gets to your eyes? What Dr. Huberman mentions in his podcast is that if it's sunny in the morning, for example, you wake up at 7 o'clock, you step outside, you look directly at the sun. If it's sunny, you may need 5 minutes to absorb that kind of light nutrients to get to your eye, to focus on your retina and go to your brain. Bang, start the clock. If it's overcast, right, there's a tiny bit of cloud, or maybe there's quite a bit of cloud, so the light rays cannot shine through, it's maybe like 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes to start that clock. If it's heavy cloud, maybe 20 minutes. The idea is that the wavelength of light is so specific that our brain can really absorb it, right? Even a heavy clouded day might be better than artificial light, because the sunlight still shines through to our eyes, and since the wavelength is a higher frequency than artificial light, still in that scenario, it is much more beneficial. So, what if you say it's a rainy day, right? There's no sun whatsoever. I'm not going to stand outside for 20 minutes looking at the sun. And realistically, you're not going to stand 20 minutes outside looking at the sun, right? All of us are generally rational human beings. If it's sunny, right, we would stand outside, because one, we get vitamin D, right? Then we also get the reset our circadian clock. But what if it's like rainy and you don't want to stand outside, or even it's cloudy, it's cold as hell, it's 7 a.m, you don't want to stand outside. Or maybe it's England, where the sun doesn't even come out, you know? Imagine you live in Norway, the sun comes out at like 10 a.m. What do you do then? So, what Dr. Huberman said in his podcast is that if no light is available, selfie rings, such as the TikTok selfie rings, or like the Instagram reel thing that the TikTokers use, are actually a decent substitute. Because contrary to popular belief, they actually have a really high frequency of wavelength. So the selfie rings actually act as a decent substitute. So you can look directly into that for a certain amount of time. It is evident that many people may not have access to these kind of equipment, and I myself do not have a selfie ring at my present disposal, right? So what Dr. Huberman says is that sunlight absorption acts as a cumulative effect. So if you don't get enough sunlight one day, you can make it up by seeing more of the sunlight the next day. An example he gave in his podcast was that if you look at the sun, you don't look at the sun on day 1, but you look at the sun directly in a sunny day for 10 minutes, which is 2 times longer than the 5 minutes first time, but it also completely resets your circadian clock. So you can you could minimize the damage done by you not seeing the sunlight in the first day. However, he does state very clearly that at least try to aim to see the sun for a certain amount of time for 80% of the days, because that's really going to benefit your sleep work schedule. It's going to make you more productive, more alert throughout the day, and make it easier for you to fall asleep at night. So, Dr. Huberman also points to a point about the sunlight setting. Everything related to light is about the circadian clock. Henceforth, towards the end of the day, what you also want to do is in the afternoon, you would want to step outside and you would want to watch the sunset. The reason why this is so prominent and why you should watch the sun, for example, at noon or like 2 p.m. is because of solar angles. This gets quite scientific, or mildly scientific, but I'm going to make it very, very simple. Solar angles are the sun's rise in the east and it goes down in the west, right? We all know that. And the solar angle is basically the angle of the sun contrary to the ground. Quite simple, right? So if the sun is at a lower solar angle, normally during the time of sunrise or sunset, it tells our brain, okay, the sun is rising because it's such a low angle. If you look at the sun directly overhead, that's a very 90 degrees angle, right? And this doesn't tell our brain, okay, we need to wake up now. Because normally as caveman, we see the lower angle, meaning there's different frequency of wavelengths, meaning that we could tell our body to reset our circadian clock. And the reason to watch the sun as it sets is because this angle is also specific, ingrained in our biological brains, telling us that, okay, the sun is about to set. That means we need to start producing melatonin, which is, as many people know, melatonin is a drug. However, it's also much of biological usage. It also is a substance secreted by the brain, is a hormone that helps us fall asleep. So similar to enzymes, if we ever learned any simple biology, there's an activation energy to each reaction, right? And melatonin acts in a similar way. If there's an amount of melatonin that surpasses the activation energy of this reaction, it basically lets you sleep, right? Quite simple. If there's not enough melatonin, you can't sleep. So hence why it's so important to let your brain know when to start producing melatonin. Exactly. All right. Now you may ask, what must you do when the sun is down in evening times? We already talked about the morning, afternoon, now we're going to talk about the evening. So another scientific point that I want to make is that you should try not to use any bright artificial lights of any color. Contrary to popular belief and stereotypes produced in this world, there are certain types of light which are better for your eyes, such as like blue light. Worse for your eyes, such as blue light, right? There are blue light blockers. However, they do really minimal effect, as Dr. Huberman points out. And he really says a key point that I really want to illustrate in this short summary is that you would try to not use overhead lights. The reason is that our eyes are split into the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid. Our lower eyelid are the eyelids that detect the sunrise, right? We see the sun above us. That's why we tell our brains to reset our circadian clock. Okay, we're gonna wake up now. If you see bright artificial lights up there, our lower eyelid will respond. Okay, it's sunrise. Whereas that's exactly what you don't want to do, because for any melatonin you produced by looking at the evening sunset, this completely automatically gets rid of it because it tells your brain, okay, it's sunrise, and that's not good. However, it might be beneficial because the upper eyelid looks down for you to have low artificial lights on the ground, presumably closer to the ground as possible. Personal example, I find it very useful to use bed lights like lamps and to use to put them on the floor so it does not disrupt your sleep pattern. It still produces a decent amount of luminescence, it just doesn't make your brain think it's sunrise, right? So that's what Dr. Huberman also points out. And this might sound like a very caveman point. So if you don't want to listen to this very caveman, very primal point, you could skip this because this is quite useless. And I think it's very impractical for modern day technology and the fact that we're living in the 21st century. But Dr. Huberman says the best thing you could possibly use is candlelight or moonlight. The idea is that artificial light has a number of like 500 to 1,000 lux, as I mentioned beforehand. Whereas candlelight and moonlight, they definitely have a much less frequent wavelength, meaning that it is less penetrating to the eye, and it could prevent you from resetting your circadian clock. Excuse me. And candlelight, actually, as a scientific perspective, has 3 to 10 lux per candle. Obviously, you got to be careful when dealing with fire, and I'm not encouraging you to deal with fire, and I personally do not use candlelight because it's quite dangerous. However, if you really want an alternative to artificial light and completely have like the best deep sleep ever, use candlelight. because it's 3 to 10 looks. It does not matter if you're looking overhead candle lights, underhead candle lights, because it's not strong enough to reset your circadian clock, and it's very useful at nighttime. Moonlight, similar, does not have very high frequency wavelength. However, we do need to wait for a very bright moon, which is not possible in most circumstances. For example, me living in the UK, where there's overcast cloud coverage most nights. Henceforth, I do believe that it is a very small amount of time that you actually can enact moonlight in your normal sleeping patterns. Cool. That's point 1, sunlight. Definitely the most important point, longest point. I'm going to go on to exercise right now. So the idea of exercise is, we're going to talk a bit about temperature later, but I'm just going to mention exercise. The best, mention temperature and exercise. The best time to exercise, arguably in a scientific perspective, is the first hour of waking. This sets a good sleep cycle because it tells your body that it needs to warm up. Evidently, we all know that exercise warms your body up. And the idea of sleeping and waking is that waking up and your body temperature rises up, meaning that we're more alert and more productive throughout the day. On the other hand, if we have a very high body temperature while going to sleep, it's harder for our brains to settle down and go into deep rest. Henceforth, we need to decrease the amount of exercise and decrease the amount of strenuous activity that we do at night, because what we are trying to do is decrease our body temperature by 1 to 3 degrees rather than increasing it. That's why exercise is good in the first hour of waking, because it really tells your body, okay, time for work, time for productivity. We woke up. Not necessarily resetting the circadian clock, just telling your body, this is vasodilation. Right? I'm going to increase our ability to perform at the highest level. And what he also points out was what I just briefed over. Later in the day, exercise will make it harder to fall asleep later, because you have a lot of adrenaline, you have a lot of dopamine, you have a lot of high blood pressure, meaning it's harder for you to relax, to have a steady tempo, to have a steady heart rate, and to really fall into that deep sleep that you really want. What Dr. Huberman also suggests, the best time for exercising would be right after waking up, 3 hours after waking up, or 11 hours after waking up. Those are the optimum times for exercise, and when our body functions best for workouts and we can produce the most amount of muscle gain. However, these are very nuanced numbers, and you don't necessarily have to absolutely follow them. I find myself that exercising 3 hours after me waking up is very beneficial for my brain, increases my productivity, and allows me to be alert always, right? But this is very specific to personal gains, and I understand why it would be very difficult for some people to exercise at a specific time, because they have work pressures, they have children to take care of, they have shifts to do, and that's absolutely fine. This is not a must do, but this is a suggestion to improve your muscle mass gain and to improve your workouts as a whole. Cool. Dr. Huberman also mentions drugs. Right, I'm not the biggest expert on this topic, but one thing I can do is synthesize the information for you, right? As a person who doesn't drink caffeine, I believe that caffeine is quite negative for my body, and I often find it very difficult to fall asleep after drinking caffeine. I also feel a lot of negative side effects when I actually drink caffeine. For example, I feel disgusted and I want to throw up. So my side of view, I do suggest you try to limit your caffeine intake, as it does have quite a negative effect on your body in the sense of sleeping. However, if you are a caffeine person who injects caffeine and has to drink caffeine, what Dr. Huberman says the best thing to do is to wait at least 90 to 20 minutes after waking to drink caffeine. as many people do experience, as I experience myself, without even drinking caffeine, is that you get an afternoon crash. Meaning any time from 1 to 3 o'clock, you get this decrease in energy. The reason is that as your body goes to optimum temperature, as you exercise early in the morning, you reset your circadian clock, and you go to a stage of you're eating a lot and you're consuming stuff, and you get to that optimum, there's obviously going to be a decrease, right? And 1 to 3 o'clock is when the decrease is sharpest, and you do feel that energy decrease, your temperature goes down, and your alertness goes down. The scientific reason for drinking caffeine 90 to 120 minutes after waking up is because this prevents the afternoon crash, at least for the majority of it, and it sort of saves you from absolutely dying in that period when you really want to do productive and alert work. Dr. Human also points out a very obvious point, is that there's no point injecting caffeine from 8 to 10 hours before sleep. Meaning that if you sleep at, for example, 10 a.m. or 10 p.m., there's no point injecting caffeine after 2 p.m. because it's really going to delay your sleep schedule, delay the melatonin that's going to be secreted into your brain, and in the end make it harder for you to fall asleep as a whole, and which makes you harder to wake up, which then changes circadian clock completely and makes you have poor quality of sleep. Even though if you don't think so, it really does have a negative impact on your sleep. So he would suggest that you can have any amount of caffeine before 2 p.m. for example. If you sleep at 10, obviously it's quite interchangeable and quite flexible for the time you actually go to sleep. Could be 12 p.m, could be 8 p.m, could be 5 p.m, right? I don't know, could be 5 p.m. You could wake up because you do shifts, which is completely understandable, or you have a night duty to take care of, for example, you babysit, or you take care of your own child, stuff like that. What he also said is that it's not completely no caffeine after 2 p.m, but it's a limited intake. He suggests that caffeine after 2 p.m, you could take caffeine in small amounts, meaning that you could take caffeine under 100 milligrams from that time to sleep if you do need a little boost, but just know that it might have a little bit of a side effect when you sleep. However, evidently the more you intake and more over that 100 grams might be the absolute boundary and frontier for what your body can handle. It does delay your sleep schedule. He also talks a little bit about alcohol and THC. THC is, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name, it's a very specific drug that helps you go to sleep in the more general sense, in the more medically used sense. However, what Human really says that alcohol, evidently so, does not help you go to sleep. It actually, even though when you feel drunk and you feel absolutely smashed, you get this like really good sleep, you do get a hangover in the morning, and that really means that you had poor quality sleep. You oftentimes, when you ingest alcohol, you wake up multiple times in the night without you actually knowing, because you're in that cloud and mind sensation. And the same thing applies for THC. He says it really negatively affects the quality of your sleep, and it feels like, even though it feels like you get to sleep easier, it really, even though you can fall asleep earlier, you really get poor quality sleep, which is less efficient and less of what we really want in the long term looking at this. I do understand that people go to nightclubs and people go to parties, and people sometimes might have to inject a certain amount of THC to fall asleep, but the trade-off on the other hand is really not worth it. There are also many other drugs that you talk about, such as CBD, which is also a drug that he doesn't recommend using. He does talk about other drugs in the future, but I do think I don't have the level of proficiency to really go in depth on how and why to use these drugs, as I personally am not a drug or medical drug user. So I do suggest you watch the drug part of the Human Lab podcast, linked in the top link in the description below. Temperature. This is also a very nuanced point. So the tiny bit of temperature that your body feels can really determine how well you sleep and how deep you sleep. What he said, Dr. Human, for a sleeping environment is that you would like to have a cool sleeping environment. This obviously depends on where in the world you live, under which conditions do you live, and but what you really want to do, aside from all those determining factors, is that you would like to decrease your body temperature by 1 to 3 degrees lower than the rest of the environment in that scenario. Because, as previously mentioned, in terms of exercise, as you decrease your body temperature, it makes it easier for your brain to secrete melatonin and in the end falling asleep. What he suggests as a really specific example was that you can make the room cold by turning on aircon, you can open the windows, determines on where, like if it's winter, don't do that, but you could try to do things as to manually control the heat of your room. He doesn't say a specific temperature, as that is determined by our health and who we really are, but he does say make the room cold, at least to you. So you can get a lot of blankets and you can sleep under these blankets if you want, but keeping a cool room basically means that if you get hot under these blankets, you can also basically in the night, what all the most people do is that they get rid of the blankets and they stick a hand or a feet outside the blankets, which in turn also cools you down, which maintains the level of sleep. The reason why many people would wake up in the middle of the night is that the body temperature gets above this 1 to 3 degrees. I said it increases 1 to 3 degrees, which is exactly what we do when we wake up. So what he says is that if you keep the room cool and your body automatically stretches out, it would keep that temperature as below 1 to 3 degrees, which is very beneficial for your body. On the other hand, he says, try to warm up the body the first thing in the morning, which is very, very on the other hand, which increases productivity, makes your brain alert. What he really suggested, as I'm going to mention now in the shower section, is that you could take a cold shower. This is very recommended because this increases your core body temperature. I'm going to talk a little bit about biology over here. As many may learn in GCSE biology, there's two words, vasoconstriction and vasodilation. The idea of vasodilation is that your blood vessels get wider so more blood can pass through to your body and it gets evaporated from the pores because there's so many blood vessels on the surface of our skin. Vasoconstriction is basically the complete opposite. Your blood vessels notice that you are cold, therefore it constricts and less heat can evaporate from your body. So what you really want to do is to stimulate your outside environment as cold as possible, which means that your blood vessels would try to contain that heat inside your body, meaning vasoconstriction, when you are having this cold shower. Henceforth, your body temperature, which would increase because the environment is colder, because you vasoconstrict and you manage to retain all the heat energy inside your body. The exact opposite happens if you take a hot shower in the morning. If you take a hot shower, the body would vasodilate because the hot shower, meaning a hot environment, would make your body think that you are hot, therefore dilating the blood vessels and making more of your internal body heat evaporate into the air, which is exactly what we do not want to be doing. What I do personally is that I find it very difficult to take a 1 to 3 minute cold shower. So what I do is that I walk into the cold shower first. It's hard, you absolutely die in the first moments, but as a person who tries to take a shower for at least 10 minutes in the morning to fix my hair, to actually get conditioner, to take care of my body, what I normally do is that I take that cold shower. However, afterwards, I increase the temperature bit by bit. So in this sense, you can actually feel it because your body temperature is getting so hot by the point that if you increase the temperature by a little bit, it actually feels similar to what you would be feeling in a warm shower. However, that temperature is still lower than your body temperature, so it does not activate your body temperature to make it drop, right? There's an activation energy in the same sense. So you think about if your body temperature is 37 degrees, try to keep the water below 37 degrees, as at least how I interpret it, and it would not make your body temperature decrease by that much. It still feels more or less like a hot shower, but it's more bearable in this sense. Similarly, for night times, or on the other hand, might I add, a warm shower or bath for less than 20 minutes would help you cool the internal core body temperature before you go to sleep. So what Dr. Human really recommends is that before 30 minutes before you go to sleep, what you really want is you can take a warm shower and bath, which is very good, right? We all love warm showers and baths. For those who have adequate resources to fund these, evidently so, but he does recommend this as it will cool the body temperature and make it easier for you to secrete melatonin and fall asleep at night. What he also says that exercise at later amounts of day, which we mentioned earlier, which was bad. The warm shower and baths could negate the negative effects of late exercise on sleep. So even though you have exercise late at night, which increase your body temperature, taking a warm shower would actually negate the thing and make it easier for you to fall asleep. Not completely, but it does to a certain extent. Cool. What I really want to talk about as my fifth point and final main point of my presentation or video or podcast or educational content, as you would like to put it, is naps and NSDR. What is NSDR as an acronym? It means non-sleep deep rest. The NSDR technique is basically a form of yoga. I'm not sure the word here. Yoga nidra, a form of yoga nidra that makes your brain calm down in the middle of the day. You could try to do a 10-minute NSDR, 20-minute NSDR, super simple. Type in NSDR on YouTube. You can find these kind of videos that help you to have deep rest whilst not taking naps. As many people might find, particularly myself, that I would take naps in the middle of the day and I'll feel very grumpy and groggy when I wake up, and I would have very low productivity, and I'll basically be looking forward to sleep, and this is not really what the rest you might want. So an alternative to that would be NSDR or meditation, suggested by Dr. Huberman, as meditation basically calms you down, it gives you more focus, it gives you rest as well as calmness in this afternoon scenario. So when you face your afternoon crash, you can do these kind of techniques so you can sleep easier. What he also said is that you could nap in the afternoon and that would not be harmful towards your night's sleep. However, you should try to limit your nap time to under 90 minutes and not close to bedtime. So normally, if you think about it, if your bedtime is 10 p.m, try to not nap any time after 3 p.m, because that is going to really disrupt your sleeping pattern. But if you do it from 1 p.m. to like 2 p.m, that would be completely fine. But do try to limit your napping to under 90 minutes so it doesn't have a negative effect on how you actually sleep. And if you take more than 90 minutes, it basically allows you to have less melatonin at night and you can sleep less deeply. So yes. What he also mentioned as a side point is that as we normally do all have a routine for work, for school, for shifts, for taking a baby to daycare in the morning, we all have a waking up routine from Monday to Friday normally. But what Dr. Huberman really emphasizes is that, especially on Saturdays and Sundays, you should try to not sleep more than 1 hour past your normal waking time. I do understand that many people might have extra work, extra shifts on weekends, or they might go to nightclubs or parties. However, what you should really try to do is that normally if you wake up at 7 a.m, try to not wake up anytime later than 8 a.m. Because waking up later than 8 a.m. would disrupt your sleeping pattern, and it'll make it very difficult in the weekdays that follow for you to get back to the 7 a.m. routine. And it would give you less sleep, less quality sleep, and it would make your productivity less good and less maintained. What he also said is that strictly, as I mentioned, in more detail earlier, strictly try to not have caffeine in the first 90 minutes after waking, as it would disrupt the future catch-up of sleep. which is exactly what I talked about. I just want to recap this point over in more detail. Right. That's cool. I have two other sub-points, very minor points. These are only for specific people. So if you're a mother or you work night shifts or you have any other reason that you might not go might be nocturnal at the middle of the night, or you have to night feed a baby or do work, the best light that Andrew Huberman suggests is dim red artificial light. He does understand that it's very difficult to get these kind of lights, but do try to do any work in total darkness, if not complete darkness, because this does make your brain easier to sleep in the following nights. He does say, try to not have caffeine, view any bright lights, or do any exercise outside your normal sleep times, as it would completely disrupt your sleep patterns. It would change your sleep schedule and make it very difficult for you to get back to a normalized version as you would normally sleep. He also suggests, if you do shift work, really try to eliminate these kinds of weekdays to a minimum. Try to have less than 3 days out of the 7 days you actually work nocturnal shifts. I understand that might be impossible for some people, but working that hard and working that intensely at night disrupts your circadian clock and naturally makes it harder for you to fall asleep in the middle of the week. Last, Dr. Andrew Huberman really emphasizes on you being a nose breather at night. He says this very comical example is that if you need, you could tape your mouth shut while you sleep. So this tackles a condition called severe sleep apnea. I don't particularly understand what that word, if you don't have severe sleep apnea. I think it's the idea is that there's a kind of acid stuck in your throat and it really disrupts your breathing, and it might be a huge problem if you don't breathe through your mouth, and you might cause a very severe harm. He says the reason why being a nose breather is so important is that it also disrupts snoring, it gets rid of snoring. It also makes your sleep more deep, as the main essence of snoring is that you wake up. When you snore, then you get back into sleep and you wake up and get back to sleep. Imagine doing that hundreds of times per night. That would really disrupt your sleeping pattern and make the deep sleep that you actually get, which is the restful sleep, less prominent. He says the way you can really train this nose breathing technique, as I know myself has been trying to do this because I have always been much of a mouth breather myself. You can train airflow through your nose by doing cardiovascular exercise, meaning like long distance running. There's kinds that train your heart, endurance exercises with your mouth closed. And again, you could tape your mouth if you need. And yes, that should be it. 38 minutes, definitely concise. I tried to simplify everything, and I really hope you like it, because this is very important. As I myself have been trying to implement this routine, I found that it really helps me with waking up, especially like these are really hard, like sunlight. I will be standing in the middle of the street at 6 a.m. in the morning looking at sunshine. It's not easy, but it really takes a lot of discipline to implement. And I really trust that if you watch the video until now, you are unlike the other 99% that clicked off this video previously. So I want to congratulate you for making it this far, and I really hope that all my techniques and all my little tips could really help you fall asleep better late at night. That was very scientific. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next one. Love you. Bye-bye.